Okay, so in this video we're going to be solving simultaneous equations, and we're just going to be focusing on the linear ones. Okay, so there won't be any quadratics in here. So if you've never done simultaneous equations before, all it means is that we're going to solve two equations at the same time. Okay, so I have things like this. I've been using x and y throughout, but sometimes I do use other letters as well. So we need to solve what x is and what y is for these two equations. Okay, now with simultaneous equations you cannot solve them without having two equations. Okay, so if you've only got one and then you've got two variables, so if you've got x and y, then you are unable to solve it. Okay, you do need to have two. So I'm going to write little steps at the same time on the side, just to help you out, especially if you've never done it before. So step 1 is to see if they have anything in common. Anything, I'm not going to fit that in common. Okay, and what I mean by that is like the same number. So if we look at the x's, this one has 1x and this one has 1x, and this has 2y and this has 1y. So they don't have the same number of y's, but they do have the same number of x's. Okay, so I'm just going to put a little rectangle around it. Now the reason why we need to see if there's anything in common is because we need to somehow eliminate either the x's or the y's. Okay, because we cannot solve it if it's got both of them in. So because they've got the same number of x's, our step 2 is to eliminate the x's. Okay, so by doing that, if we subtracted the equations away from each other, so we're going to do the x take away x, 2y take away y, and the 5 take away 3, we're going to end up having no x's here, which is what we want. Okay, so x take away x is nothing, 2y take away y is 1y, and 5 take away 3 is 2. Okay, now straight away we now know what y is. Okay, step 3 is that we pick an equation and substitute in. Okay, what I mean by that is because we now know what y is, we can substitute the value of y into one of the equations, and then we can work out what x is using just normal, normal steps that you would just solve a normal linear equation with. So it doesn't matter which one you pick. I'm going to pick the bottom one, so I'm just going to rewrite it first. Okay, the reason why I've just picked it is because they're just x and y, whereas that one's got a 2y. Okay, but it doesn't matter, you will get the same answer. Now because we know that y is actually 2, all I'm going to do is replace that y with the number 2, like that. Okay, so from there we can just solve it like a normal equation. So we want x on its own, so we need to subtract 2 from both sides. So I'll be left with x is equal to 1. Okay, so that's my final answer. So you've got a number for the x and a number for the y. Okay, so the next one. So step 1 is that we see if they've got anything in common. So 3x and 2x aren't the same number of x's, so that doesn't help us out. Y and negative y, they do have the same number, because imagine if they had, I know we're a bit lazy, but normally we'd write a 1 in front. So these do have something in common. Okay, they've got the same number of y's. Okay, now although they have got different signs, that is okay. You'll see in a second when we do another example of when it isn't okay. So we need to now try and eliminate the y's. Okay, so if we added them together, so 1y add negative y, I'm going to do it over here in a little bubble. So 1y add negative 1y. If you remember these signs, if you add a negative, that will just be subtracting it. which gives us 0 y's. Okay, so that's why we're adding them together. Okay, we're not going to subtract them like we did the first time. So if we add them, we're going to end up having 5x on the left. This would obviously become 0. Add those together, that will give us 20. Okay, and then we divide it just like we do with a normal equation. We're going to divide by 5 to work out what x is. So x is equal to 4. So that's step 2. Step 3, we're going to pick an equation, either the top or the bottom one, and then substitute in. I'm going to pick the top one just because there are no negatives. And I know a lot of people generally make mistakes with their negatives. Okay, but again, you could have picked the one below. So we know that x is 4. Okay, this time it does have a 3 in front. So just remember that if there's a number in front, that just means that we multiply. Okay, so 3 multiplied by 4 plus y is equal to 11. 3 multiplied by 4 is 12. Okay, so then we're going to subtract 12 from both sides because we just want to know what y is, which is negative 1. Okay, so that's our answer. X is 4 and y is negative 1. Okay, we're going to do a couple more. So those two were the easiest ones that you could get. And now we're going to do slightly harder ones. So if we start with this one, so again, step 1 is that we see whether they've got anything in common. So do they have the same number of x's? No, because you've got 5 and 3. Do they have the same number of y's? No, because it's -3 and 2. So this time we're going to have to do an extra step before we can do the steps that we've been doing before. So we need to make sure that they have the same number of x's or the same number of y's. Okay. I'm going to make the same number of y's just because 3 and 2 are smaller numbers than 5 and 3. And I'm thinking about what lowest common multiple would be between 2 and 3. So if I multiplied this one by 2 and multiplied this one by 3, negative 3 times 2 would give me negative 6y. And plus 2y times by 3 would give me positive 6y. So it would be like the one we've just done, where although the sign's different, there will be the same number of y's. Okay, so when we do this bit, make sure you multiply everything by 2. So 5x times by 2 is 10x. Minus 3y times by 2 is minus 6y. And 9 times 2 is 18. Okay, and the same for this one. 3x times 3 is 9x. 2y times 3 is plus 6y. And 13 times 3 is 39. Okay. Okay, so now we can see that we've got the same number of y's. Now, as we said before, so that we can eliminate those, we're going to have to add them together. Okay, because if we took them away, it would be negative 6y take away 6y, which would give you negative 12y, okay, which wouldn't get rid of them. Okay, so we're going to add them. I'm just going to move it over here a little bit. So if we add those together, that's going to give me 19x. We've now got no y's, which is what we want. And then if we add those, that is 57. Okay. Then we just solve that to work out what x is. So divide by 19, which gives me that x is 3. Okay, now this part you could have done it for the x's and it wouldn't have made a difference. The only difference would be at this point you would have found out what y is, not what x is, but you would still get the same answer in the end. Okay, so we now know what x is, we can then work out what y is. So again, we can pick 4 different equations now if you wanted. I'm still going to stick with this bottom one here, just because 1, their numbers are smallest, and 2, they're all positive. So again, I'm going to just write out the equation first. So 3x plus 2y equals 13. We know that x is 3. So I'm going to do 3 times by 3. Okay, so the first 3 is just because it was 3x, and the second 3 is from here. Then 2y equals 13. And then simplify it, and then we can solve it. So 3 times 3 is 9. So 9 plus 2y equals 13. We're going to subtract the 9 from both sides because eventually we just want y on its own. So we have 2y equals 4. And then we divide by 2, which gives me that 1y is equal to 2. Okay? So that's the hardest that you'll get, just because you're going to have to do an extra step at the beginning. Okay, so turn over. I'm just going to do one more, just because these are the sorts of ones that people always get wrong. So I thought I would add it in. Okay, so again, step 1, see if they've got anything in common. So they don't have the same number of x's, so that doesn't help, but they do have the same number of y's. They've both got minus 1y. Okay, now a lot of people at this step will try and add them together. Okay, now the reason why adding doesn't work is because if you add them, so you have minus y, add minus y. If we think about our properties of negative and positive signs where they're next to each other, this would just make it a negative. Okay, so negative y take away another y would be negative 2y. So that doesn't actually eliminate the y's like we want to. Okay, so we don't need to add them, we actually need to subtract them away from each other. Okay, and the reason why is because you've got to subtract a negative. That actually means that you're going to add it on. So negative y add y would give you 0. Okay, so if we subtract them then, 4x take away 2x is just 2x. These would cancel. Okay, again, be careful with your negatives. So negative 9 subtract negative 7. Okay, you're actually going to add 7 on to negative 9, which is negative 2. Okay, if you do struggle with your negatives, make sure you use a number line. That's the easiest way to do calculations like this. And again, we just want x, so we're going to divide by 2. And that gives us that x is negative 1. Okay, again, you pick an equation. I'm going to pick the bottom one. So first thing I'm going to do is write it out. We know that x is negative 1. So we're going to do 2 multiplied by negative 1, negative y equals negative 7. Lots of negatives there. Okay, so that gives me that. I'm going to do it over here. Negative 2 subtract y is equal to negative 7. Okay, I'm going to add 2 onto both sides because then I'll be left with minus y, which isn't perfect, but it will still get me the answer eventually. Okay, again, just be careful with these. So negative 7, add 2 will give you negative 5 because you're getting closer to 0. Okay, now think of this as being negative 1 at the front. If we divide both sides by negative 1, negative 1 divided by negative 1 would give you positive. So that will leave me with y, which is what we wanted. Then negative 5 divided by negative 1 would give me positive 5. Okay, so there are my two answers. X is negative 1 and y is 5.